This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Trying to get corporations to realize that every time they walk in an intersection, they don't always have to look forward. They can look this way, they can look this way, they can look down or up or behind them.
Bill Imada, what a treat to have you here in the Upper Cumberland and at Tennessee Tech. And we're actually taping this at the iCube lab, the Center of Innovation here at Tennessee Tech. And you're going to be visiting with students, right?
Absolutely, and I'm very excited about being in Cookeville and Putnam County and the Upper Cumberland. So looking forward to the talk.
You are the founder, chairman, and chief connectivity officer of IW. And I want you to tell me what that is, but I want to talk about our relationship here, and that's because we're fellow members of the National PBS Board of Directors. And you're my friend.
Yes.
And I'm so glad about the work we're doing together as board members with the incredible team at PBS. How do you feel about PBS?
Well, first of all, I'm a big advocate for public media, and I immediately connected with you because I could tell that you were very open-minded about things, that you had a view for change, that you were looking for innovation, and so I felt immediate connection. But I feel the same way about everyone else on that board. I think that public media is changing the way we have conversations, and it's a very important vehicle for us.
Tell us about IW, because that's really, it's when I read about it, it's your organization, it's your business, public relations business, marketing. Tell us about the whole connectivity of that business.
Well, it started 26 years ago, and I actually was working for a larger public relations agency, and I had a chance to pitch a very large beer company and got that opportunity to pitch the beer company. Ultimately won that business only to be told by the president of this very large agency that I worked for that they could not represent this company because of a conflict. And so I had to give the bad news to the beer company, and the beer company executive said, "Why don't you start your own company?" And I said, "Why would I do that?" And he said, "Because I think you're very talented at what you do." And I said, "Well, I graduated from college in debt, like I'm sure a lot of Tennessee Tech University students can relate to." And he said, "How much is your debt?" And I said, $80,000 at least. And I said, "I need to work." And then a few days later, I got an $80,000 check from the executive of this company, and that's what launched the company.
Wow, what an incredible story. Did he continue to be a mentor to you?
He did. He was a mentor of mine for 11 years. He's since retired. And we chat every so often, and he's just been a great role model for me and for so many other people that follow him.
How wise of him to see that, to recognize that so quickly and to encourage you. How important is that for CEOs to do that sort of thing?
It's extremely important. I think, and one thing that I love about the president of Tennessee Tech University and someone like you is President Oldham once said, that you have to remember where you're from. You have to remember where your roots are from. And he also said that as Golden Eagles, I believe that's the mascot for Tennessee Tech, he said eagles mate for life, and eagles tend to travel around hundreds of miles in their lifetime, but they always come back home. And so I think that as mentors, we need to remember where we're from, and we also have to come back to where we're from and make sure that we mentor the next generation.
It's so true, and you and I serve at PBS on the diversity committee and inclusion, and that's very much about your business as well. Your marketing really resonates and focuses on communities of diversity.
Yeah, and I'm a big advocate of diversity and inclusion, but I think diversity and inclusion is a little bit of a tired term, so I actually want to include engagement in that as well. But unfortunately, we can't say diversity, inclusion, and engagement because the acronym is DIE, DIE. So, but you could have diversity on a campus, or you could have diversity in the boardroom. But if people aren't engaged, then there really isn't any diversity or inclusion. So people that come to the table to have conversations with us really need to be engaged actively. So I actually believe that diversity should be converted to representation, that we should have a representation of views and ideas. And that's why I love talking to you, and that's why I'm here in the Upper Cumberlands, because diversity includes people that come from smaller towns, because I'm from a smaller town. So that's why I think it's very important for us to engage. So if we're going to really embrace diversity and inclusion, we have to have representation and engagement.
You know, we talk about that a lot nationally, is how your region, where you come from, can also place you in a community of diversity, like we're saying, because often it is about representation. If all the decision makers are in major cities and they're not hearing the voices of rural communities and rural people, then they can't know how to serve them, right? And it's really about service. You're an advocate of customer service.
I agree with that, and part of it is because I was born in a small town in Eastern Oregon. It's half the size of Cookeville. It's about 15,000 people, and all of the attention was focused on Portland and Salem, the larger cities. So I'm sure the same is true here. Nashville gets a lot of the attention, or Knoxville, or Chattanooga, or Memphis, and so often the rural communities get left behind. And so that's why I think it's very important for both of us to continue to advocate for a wider or broader view of diversity to include people that come from rural communities.
You also are the founder of the National Millennial community. And what is that? Tell me about that. We've talked a little bit, but our viewers probably, millennials are the younger generation. There's lots of focus, lots of talk about the millennials. What do the millennials want? But our business is actually asking the millennials. That was your idea, right?
So the situation with the millennials is they now are the largest consumer segment. They've already passed boomers. So there's anywhere from 70 to 83 million millennials, depending on who you ask. And the reason why this organization, the National Millennial Community, was started was to give them a voice. And I don't think corporate America and governmental agencies and foundations really ask for their opinion. And they're 1/4 of the US population. They're going to be the biggest workforce in America, so we really do have to pay attention to them. So the community was started to change the conversation about them, to allow them to speak for themselves and allow them to shape the conversation with corporate America, with governmental agencies and foundations. So I'm really proud that you pulled in Tennessee Tech University. And the other reason why I think it started was I came from a university that tended to be marginalized by larger universities like UCLA and USC in California. And so whenever major corporations wanted to recruit people, they would always go to those universities first, and they would always be top of mind. And I said one day, if I could ever be in a position to help students that go to universities that aren't always thought of first and foremost, that I would make an effort to do that.
Well, I'm so grateful for that, Bill, and you've been so embracing and engaging with our College of Business. Dean Payne, also Amy Jo Carpenter has been the advisor, and we have 4 students already who are actively engaged in the millennial community. In fact, they've already been active in the webinars with some of the CEOs and a site visit.
Yes.
Share how Tennessee Tech is actually fitting into this experiential opportunity.
Well, first of all, the views of folks from Tennessee are critically important to the conversation, because typically corporate America goes to the East Coast or the West Coast, so they don't always talk to people, the real people that live in the middle of the country. So what was cool about the Tennessee Tech University selection was the broad diversity that Carpenter and you put together. So when the 2 representatives came from Tennessee Tech University to San Francisco, one of them just happened to be Asian American, and it just surprised me. And the other person was African American, and their views of the country, their views of the region, their views of the workforce and their aspirations were unique. And so it enriched the conversation, and I also think it enriched the conversations with companies like eBay and Wells Fargo. So when we actually went to the conversations with these executives, we're going around the room and people were saying, well, I'm from California and I'm from New York. And of course, that's not a big deal. But when it got to Wesley and Jessica from Tennessee Tech, they said, we're from Tennessee. The executive said, you're from where? And they said Tennessee. And all of a sudden, their attention kind of focused on Tennessee and Alaska and Kansas and Missouri. Places that they don't normally have conversations, and part of it is their fault. But what was enriching about it was that they were there to provide that perspective.
That's great. That is so exciting to hear. And we're just starting. I mean, you're going to be speaking with students today, and hopefully this won't be your last visit to Tennessee Tech, because we've started this wonderful relationship. What do you hope everyone will gain out of this opportunity, this millennial conversation?
I want the students and the faculty to believe that executives are human and that they're approachable, and they shouldn't worry about where they're from. They shouldn't be worried about whether or not they're going to make a good impression. They should take a risk and reach out to these executives and tell them what they believe, what their aspirations and needs are, and what their interests are for the future of not only our country, but for the companies that work in these in this country. So that's one of the key takeaways that I want students to have, is that they should be able to have conversations with anyone, and that their perspective on the country and the world make a difference.
Now, I get a lot of questions often from people who are Generation X, which is sort of in between the boomer and the millennials. Well, what about us? Why doesn't anybody want to know what we think or what we're interested in? What's your answer to that?
Gen X is a very important connector. And so I think that they should look at themselves as what Malcolm Gladwell said in the tipping point, that they are the connection point between boomers and millennials. And that role is critically important. The other thing that's critically important for Gen Xers, and I don't think they necessarily realize this, is that they can help advance millennials, because they're in the workforce now. They have children or families. They're consumers of homes and cars and other things. They're in a position to help millennials get to the next stage. And so that's a critically important role. The other part that's important is that they're also the connector for the boomers. So they could also help boomers kind of understand the gaps between generation and how to bring them together.
You have a major marketing company with really serious clients. I'm just going to read some of them. Coca-Cola, American Airlines, General Motors, Godiva Chocolate, Chocolatier, McDonald's, Nissan of North America, Walt Disney, so many. What is it about working with these large clients? What do you bring to the table that they keep coming back?
I believe that, and part of the reason why I'm the Chief Connectivity Officer is I see a lot of dots. And a lot of times people don't know how to connect those dots. So I always look for an intersection between communities, consumers, governmental agencies, the not-for-profit world, public media, and try to find a way to connect those dots so that people can build communities and create a better world where people are more understanding of differences and embrace those differences. So that's one of the things that I bring to the table, is that I'm able to connect those dots. But I'm also trying to get corporations to realize that every time they walk in an intersection, they don't always have to look forward. They can look this way, they can look this way, they can look down or up or behind them or diagonally, and they should always find a connection point with every single community and consumer. And I think that that's what we need in our country, and I think that's what companies are looking for.
Where did that come from, Bill? Where did you get that desire, that passion to connect people, to connect ideas?
Part of it is from the executive that helped me, from the beer company. It was the best MBA money could buy. After he gave me this large sum of money and I started my company, frankly, he was very mean. Because I think he realized that, hey, I gave Bill this chunk of money to start this company. I really own him, and I really own his company. So he demanded the best from us. And I actually resented him for a good portion of my work with him. And then I realized after working with him for a few years that he's actually been a great mentor and I should repay him. So I went to him one day and said, what could I do for you? You've helped me so much with my career. And he said, Mr. Imada, help 100 people and your debt's repaid. And I took that as a mandate to do something, to find ways to connect people, to find ways to help people that didn't have some of the opportunities that I had when I was starting my company. And that's where it comes from. It was just from that conversation. Help 100 people. So I made it a point to add a few zeros, so my goal is to help 1 million people.
Wow, 1 million people. Where are you on your count?
I think I'm pretty far along. I speak at a university, one university per week. I'm on 7 boards. My company's on 30 different boards and community organizations, and we started 3 national groups.
What's the other national group?
So they're more specific to my community, the Asian American community. So we started the Asian and Pacific Islander American Scholarship Fund in Washington, D.C. They just celebrated 10 years. I started the Asian and Pacific Islander Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship in Washington just about 3 years ago. And of course, the National Millennial Community.
That's fantastic.
And that's about 8 months old.
That is fantastic. And I know you are on a lot of boards. In fact, you're on the, it's a film and media board in Los Angeles, right?
I'm on the Coalition for Asian Pacifics in Entertainment in LA and the Center for Asian American Media in San Francisco.
That is fantastic. And you have offices in several locations, correct?
Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, and most recently Dallas.
Wow, Dallas. You've been thinking about Tennessee?
Well, I'd love to be in Tennessee. Do you have an office space for me?
Well, you know what? We're working on that. We'll work on that. Who do you think, you mentioned this person who influenced you. Who else influenced you? How important was education and family in your life?
Family is very important, of course, and I think my family really pushed and pushed and pushed because neither of them had a chance to go to college. So education was first and foremost an important priority for our family. But my brothers and sisters actually influenced me just as much as my parents because without perpetuating too many stereotypes about Asian Americans, I have 3 pharmacists in my family, an engineer in my family. My sister worked in a laboratory, and my brother-in-law is an engineer, and my uncle is a professor emeritus in medicine at the University of Southern California. So I was pushed in that direction. And my brothers one day pulled me aside and said, don't be a pharmacist. Don't go into medicine. Don't be an engineer. You're better working with different communities and people and connecting dots. Maybe you ought to pursue that. So try that. So my brothers and sisters had a major impact on the direction that I chose to go in.
Do you see students now needing that same sort of direction? And is that something you can help with?
I hope so. So my job is to kind of help them find the dots, and often they know where those dots are, and then enable them to connect to those dots. So absolutely. I do think students would like to have mentors, but often they don't know how to get a mentor. And they often don't know how to develop that relationship with a mentor. And oftentimes the mentor doesn't know how to relate to the mentee. So yes, the answer is yes.
Do you, I'm sure there are wonderful highlights in your career, but there also have to be challenges and times that were challenging. What were the most challenging times for you?
The most challenging times, I think, was when I first started. I worked for an agency, and I wish I could relive this and do this all over again, but I worked for an agency, and I had a very smart executive who would often ask me questions that I would find odd, and it was very challenging for me to deal with that. And so I was an angry person when I started, because he would come to me and say, Bill, I have to ask you this question. What do Chinese people like to eat? And I would say, what do you think Chinese people like to eat? Chinese food, of course. But I'm sure they like Italian food as well. I mean, and I would just say, why am I being asked strange questions? Or do Cambodian people like Cambodian food? And just odd questions like that. So I think that was a big challenge for me. So I kind of grew up a little angry, saying I went to college and I shouldn't be treated in this manner. And when you find that you're the only person that looks like you at a company, it often is a little isolating. So I had to deal with that much through my career, even though I grew up in LA. I was born in a rural community, grew up most of the time in LA. I had to deal with all sorts of those types of challenges where people would look at you funny and say, are you really American? And why are you here? And when are you planning to go back? And I went, I don't plan on going back to Eastern Oregon anytime soon. But those types of challenges, I think, hurt me a little bit and impeded my progress as I was growing up and as I started a company. And some of that continues to this day. I have to justify who I am, and I have to justify what the company does, and I have to reassert my love for the country, that I was born here, that I'm really an American, and I've been here 3-4 generations. And so I think that that continues to kind of keep me from progressing sometimes.
It is hurtful. So how do we change that? I mean, how can all of us change that?
One thing is that I've learned is that we have to eliminate being PC. Now, I don't think anybody should say anything so rude that it stops people from having a conversation, but sometimes we're so politically correct that we don't engage in real conversations. So if I had to do that situation over again and talk to the president of this company and he asked me about Chinese people eating Chinese food, rather than be angry about it and make a face, I think probably the conversation should have gone like this. Well, I'm not really sure because I was born in the States, but let's ask a few, Chinese and Chinese Americans, what they might think about that, or let me give you another opinion about this. And I think we should look at every conversation as a teachable moment, and we don't always do that. And so what's happened in this country today is that people are afraid to ask African Americans about things, or Latinos are afraid to ask Caucasians about things, and Asian Americans don't want to say anything because they don't want to be rude or disrespectful. And I actually think that we should be a little bit more open-minded about our conversations and say what we think, and then allow people to kind of say, well, we have a different perspective on this, and that's not happening as much as I would like. So that's what I'd like to see.
That sounds great. And I think public media is a great place to have those conversations.
Absolutely. And you're one of those people that you reached out and said, I want to learn from you. And I said, well, I want to learn from you as well. And I think that those types of conversations are more meaningful. And I think that's going to also improve understanding between communities if we're very open-minded about those conversations.
What can rural markets do? We're going to run out of time before I get to all the questions that I want to ask you, but we are in a rural community and region. So what can they do to really engage, even market themselves? I mean, so that people are listening to their voice.
I think that they need to show the value that the rural communities bring to this country, and frankly, the country would not operate without rural communities. And I believe that part of that means we have to be more proactive because people get very comfortable in their very large cities and they look at diversity from a different lens. So I actually believe that the rural communities need to get out more, bring people and invite people into their communities, and also go to where the influencers are. And that's why the Millennial community is so important, is that we need to bring people out and show corporate America, governmental agencies, elected officials, civic leaders, that this is a part of America and it's part of the fabric of our country, and that's what makes our country tick. And so that means getting out more. And I know that's not very comfortable for people, but I do think that the stories that you hear in rural America are just as enriching as any community or city, large or small, in this country. And that's important.
You are very much about customer service, about you're passionate, you work a lot. And in this time that we have left, what is it, is it all just passion? Can you move something forward if you're just passionate about it? Or what else does it take?
It takes unconventional thinking sometimes, by breaking some of the rules and challenging. So I think the last few minutes I would like to say is that I believe very strongly that you need to challenge conventional wisdom. And in a university community like Cookeville, that should be happening. So I don't ever say that you should think outside the box. I always say I think in the box first, then step out. I don't tell people that you shouldn't reinvent the wheel. We've been reinventing the wheel forever. If somebody can do that, they should. And I never tell people that we should level the playing field, because the playing field is never going to be level, but we should look at that as an opportunity to innovate, to come up with creative ideas, to push the envelope a little further. And I also believe that the answers to our country's problems and the region's problems are often found in local communities, rural communities. And people should believe that, and once they believe that, then they can make change happen.
That's so fantastic. Well, I know we're out of time. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Well, and thank you for choosing Tennessee Tech and these students and our community to partner with. I look forward to working with you more. And the next time you come, maybe we could open this up and have an extended conversation with others.
That would be great. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.